Millionaire ordered a private maid for his fiancée, then he discovered his secret son. She was standing in a tiny house in Little Havana, pressing a cloth against a 6-year-old boy's forehead, when the man in the doorway said something that made the whole room go still. "He looks like me." His voice cracked on the last word. Not the polished voice of a man who ran a $400 million telecommunications empire. Not the voice that had closed deals on 3 continents and commanded boardrooms full of men twice his age. This was the voice of someone whose entire world had just been rearranged in less than 10 seconds. Samantha did not turn around. She kept her hands steady on her son's forehead, kept her eyes on the shallow cut she was cleaning, kept her breathing controlled the way she had taught herself to breathe in every impossible moment for the past 7 years. But her heart was slamming against her ribs like it wanted out of her body entirely. "He should," Rosa said from the kitchen doorway. Her mother's voice was trembling, but not from the Parkinson's this time. This trembling was deliberate. "Chosen. He should look like you. He's yours." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Samantha counted them the way she counted everything in her life. Carefully, precisely, because precision was how you survived when the world gave you nothing else to hold on to. Then her son, her beautiful, perceptive, impossibly brave 6-year-old son, looked past Samantha's shoulder at the stranger frozen in the doorway and asked a question that cut through every wall every adult in that room had spent years building. "Mama, is that my dad? Now I know what you are thinking. How did we get here? How did a woman end up on her knees in her mother's kitchen, hiding a secret from a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars? A secret that shared his blood, his eyes, his stubborn jaw. And how did that same man end up standing in a house smaller than his closet, discovering that the life he thought he had built was missing the most important piece? But before I answer those questions, I need to ask you one. Have you ever made a choice that you knew would break your own heart, because the alternative would have broken someone else's? Have you ever carried a truth so heavy that it changed the shape of your spine, your sleep, your ability to trust anything good that happened to you? Because that is exactly what Samantha Johnson did for 7 years. And the story of how she ended up in the same house as the man she had been running from, serving dinner to his fiancée while her son slept 10 miles away with no idea his father lived behind iron gates on Star Island, is a story that will make you question everything you think you know about love, about sacrifice, and about whether the people who hurt us the most can ever truly become the people we need them to be. This is that story. And I promise you, by the time we reach the end, nothing will be the way you expected it. Let us go back to the beginning. 6 weeks before that moment in Rosa's kitchen, Samantha Johnson woke up at 4:45 in the morning in a 2-bedroom apartment in Little Havana that smelled like café con leche and old paint. The alarm on her phone was set to vibrate because the walls were thin enough to hear her neighbor's television, which meant they were thin enough to hear an alarm, and Daniel needed every minute of sleep he could get before school. She lay still for 30 seconds, not because she was tired, although she was always tired, but because those 30 seconds were the only part of her day that belonged entirely to her. No one needed anything from her at 4:45 in the morning. No one was asking her to fix something or carry something or explain something or pretend that everything was fine when it was not. 30 seconds. Then she got up. The bathroom mirror showed her exactly what it always showed her. A woman who looked older than 30. Not from age, but from the kind of living that adds years the way gravity adds weight. Slowly, constantly, without permission. Her dark hair was pulled back in a knot she would redo 3 times before it met her standards. Her eyes were clear, but guarded. The kind of eyes that had seen enough to know that hope was a luxury and preparation was a necessity. She ironed her blouse on the kitchen counter because the apartment did not have an ironing board. 3 passes on each sleeve, 2 on the collar. Every crease mattered because presentation was the last armor a person had when everything else had been stripped away. She had learned this in her first year of domestic service, working for a family in Charleston who paid her $12 an hour to be invisible, efficient, and immaculate. The invisible part came naturally. The efficient part she had taught herself. The immaculate part she had perfected because it was the one thing in her life she could control completely. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A notification from the medical billing office. Rosa's neurologist appointment was in 9 days. The copay was $180. Her checking account balance was $412. Rosa's medication cost $340 a month. The math never worked. It had not worked in 3 years. But Samantha made it work anyway, the way she made everything work. By choosing which impossible thing to solve first and ignoring the rest until they became emergencies. She heard Rosa moving in the kitchen before she saw her. The slow shuffle of slippers on linoleum, the soft clink of the metal espresso pot being placed on the stove. Rosa's hands trembled now, the early stage Parkinson's making every task a negotiation between her brain and her body. But she still made coffee every morning by muscle memory, the same way she had made it for 40 years, because some rituals are too sacred to surrender to a diagnosis. "Morning, Mia," Rosa said without turning around. "You iron that shirt anymore, and it is going to file a complaint." Samantha almost smiled. Almost. "Morning, Mama. How did you sleep?" Rosa waved a hand, which was her universal answer for questions she did not want to engage with honestly. "Daniel had a dream about sharks again. Came into my room at 2 o'clock. Wanted to know if sharks can open doors. Can they? I told him no. But honestly, I do not know anymore. The things that boy asks me. Last week he wanted to know if the ocean has a bottom. I said yes. He said, prove it. He is 6, Samantha, 6 years old, and he is already asking me for evidence. He gets it from me, Samantha said. She poured coffee into a mug that had a chip on the rim and a faded logo from a restaurant that had closed 4 years ago. He gets a lot of things from you, Rosa agreed. And some things from other places. The words hung in the kitchen like steam from the coffee pot. Rosa never mentioned Stephen Cruz by name. She did not have to. The reference existed in the spaces between what she said, the way certain truths exist in the spaces between what people are willing to speak out loud. Samantha drank her coffee and said nothing. At 6:15 she checked on Daniel. He was still asleep, one arm thrown over his pillow, his dark hair pressed flat on one side from the way he burrowed into the mattress like he was trying to tunnel to the center of the earth. He had his father's eyes, that same fierce dark brown that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He had his father's jaw. He had his father's unsettling habit of going completely still when he was processing something important, as if his body needed to shut down all other functions to dedicate full power to his brain. He was the most beautiful thing Samantha had ever seen. And every single day, he looked a little more like the man she had spent 7 years trying to forget. She kissed his forehead. He stirred, but did not wake. I will be home Thursday, she whispered. Be good for Abuela. I love you more than everything. Then she picked up her bag, checked her reflection one final time, and walked out the door toward the job that would either save her family or destroy the careful architecture of the life she had built to protect them. The agency had called 3 days earlier. A placement had opened up. Top-tier household, Star Island, Miami. The kind of address that did not appear on regular maps, only on the mental maps of people who understood that real wealth did not announce itself from the street. It hid behind walls and gates, and the kind of landscaping that cost more per month than most families spent on food in a year. Personal attendant to the lady of the house. $4,200 a month plus room and board on work days. Medical benefits after 60 days. It was the best offer Samantha had received in 3 years of working through prestige staffing, the kind of placement that could stabilize everything. Rosa's medical bills, Daniel's school fees, the transmission on her car that had been making a sound she could not afford to diagnose. She had almost declined when she saw the name on the placement form. Cruz Estate, Star Island, Miami. She had stared at those words for 11 minutes. She knew because she watched the clock on her phone change from 3:17 to 3:28, while her pulse did something medical professionals would probably want to examine. Cruz, Stephen Cruz, the man she had loved at 21 with the blind, consuming, catastrophic intensity of someone who did not yet understand that love and destruction could wear the same face. The man whose mother had sat her down in a room that smelled like lilies and old money and explained, with surgical precision, that Samantha's presence in Stephen's life was a deviation from a plan that had been set in motion long before she existed. The man she had walked away from carrying nothing but her dignity and a secret she would not discover for another 6 weeks. She should have called the agency back, told them she was unavailable, found another placement, a smaller one, a safer one that did not require her to walk through the front gates of the only place in Miami that could unmake her. But $4,200 a month, medical benefits, room and board. Daniel needed new shoes. Rosa's prescription was due. The transmission was getting worse. Samantha picked up her phone and accepted the placement. The drive to Star Island took 40 minutes in morning traffic. Samantha used every one of those minutes to construct the version of herself she would need to survive this. Professional, controlled, A woman with excellent references and no personal history with the household she was entering. Samantha Johnson, domestic professional. Not Samantha Johnson, the 21-year-old intern who had fallen in love with the heir to Cruz Communications during a summer that had felt like the beginning of everything and turned out to be the end. She parked her car, a 12-year-old Honda with 200,000 miles and that concerning transmission sound, in the service lot behind the estate. For a moment, she sat with her hands on the steering wheel, breathing. Not the shallow, automatic breathing of a person going about their day. The deep, deliberate breathing of a person putting on armor. Then she got out and walked toward the service entrance. The estate was exactly as she remembered it, which meant it was exactly as oppressive as she remembered it. 3 acres of waterfront property, white limestone and glass walls that reflected the Atlantic like the house itself was trying to become the ocean. Palm trees lining the driveway in perfect symmetry, each one the same height, the same angle, the same distance from its neighbor. The landscaping was immaculate, every hedge sculpted, every flower intentional, nothing wild or unplanned permitted on these grounds. It was the kind of home that whispered control from every manicured surface. Samantha had understood that 7 years ago, the first time she had walked through these gates as an intern attending a company reception. She understood it now with the sharper, harder clarity of a woman who had learned exactly what that control looked like when it was pointed at you. The service entrance was around the back. A discreet door painted to match the limestone so it virtually disappeared into the wall. Because the people who made this house function were supposed to disappear too. Present but invisible, essential but unseen. Samantha knocked. A woman opened the door within 30 seconds. Mid-50s, compact build, silver hair cut close to her head in a style that prioritized efficiency over vanity. She wore a navy dress with a small, gold pin on the collar that Samantha recognized as the Cruz household insignia. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, and not unkind, but not warm either. She had the expression of someone who had managed difficult households long enough to evaluate a new hire in under 5 seconds. Miss Johnson, I am Gloria, head of household operations. Come in. Thank you. Gloria led her through a back corridor that smelled like fresh linen and lemon polish. The floors were marble. The lighting was recessed and calibrated to make everything look like a photograph. Even the service hallways in this house were beautiful, which struck Samantha as either impressive or absurd, depending on your relationship with money. I will walk you through the house and the expectations before you meet Miss Maria, Gloria said, her pace brisk enough that Samantha had to lengthen her stride to keep up. Mr. Cruz's fiancée requires a personal attendant who can manage her wardrobe, coordinate her daily schedule, prepare meals to her dietary specifications, and ensure the household operates with a kind of precision that makes comfort look effortless. Do you understand what that means? It means she should never have to ask for something because I have already anticipated it, Samantha replied. Gloria glanced back with the first flicker of approval. Exactly. Miss Maria is particular. Samantha understood the diplomacy in that word. She had worked enough wealthy households to know that particular was what staff said, when they meant something far less generous but needed to remain employed. She is particular about her schedule. She is particular about her environment. She is particular about the people around her. This is not a criticism. It is information. The more accurately you understand her preferences, the more smoothly this household will function and the longer your employment will last. Understood. Gloria walked her through the main floor. A living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay. A dining room that seated 20 but probably hosted 2. A kitchen the size of Samantha's entire apartment, all white marble and professional-grade appliances that gleamed like they were performing for an audience. Every room looked like a magazine spread, beautiful, curated, and fundamentally unlived in. Samantha memorized the layout as they moved. The exits, the blind spots, the rooms where conversations could happen without being overheard. She noted which hallways connected to which wings, which doors had locks, which stairways led to the service quarters versus the family quarters. It was an old habit from her first years in domestic work. Always know the architecture of the space you are occupying. Know where you can go and where you cannot. Know how to move through a house without being seen, because invisibility is your greatest professional asset and sometimes your greatest personal protection. Your quarters are in the East Wing, Gloria continued, opening a door to reveal a small but clean room with a single bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the garden. You will stay here Monday through Thursday. Weekends are yours unless Miss Maria requires additional support for events. That is fine, Samantha said. The room was larger than Daniel's bedroom at home. She tried not to think about that. Gloria checked her watch. Mr. Cruz would like to meet you briefly this afternoon. He interviews all household staff personally. It is a formality. Your references have already been approved through the agency. But he insists on meeting everyone who works under this roof. Samantha's stomach dropped. Not visibly. Nothing about her posture or expression changed. She had spent 7 years perfecting the art of feeling one thing and showing another, and she was very, very good at it. Of course, she said. What time? 2 o'clock. His study is on the 2nd floor. I will come for you at 1:50. That is fine, Samantha repeated. And it would be fine. She would make it fine. She had walked into harder rooms carrying heavier secrets. She would sit across from Stephen Cruz and be exactly who her references said she was. A professional, a stranger. A woman he had never held in his arms at 21 while the Miami skyline burned orange outside his apartment window, and he whispered things against her hair that she had been foolish enough to believe. She would be fine. At 1:50, Gloria appeared at her door. Samantha followed her up a staircase that curved like something from a film set, each step carpeted in something so soft it felt like walking on silence. The 2nd floor hallway was lined with art. Large canvases in heavy frames, the kind of pieces that were chosen by consultants rather than by anyone who actually loved them. They were beautiful the way everything in this house was beautiful. Deliberately, expensively, without warmth. Gloria stopped at a mahogany door at the end of the hall. She knocked twice, waited for the low come-in that filtered through the wood, then stepped aside and gestured for Samantha to enter. The study was large but not cavernous. Built-in bookshelves lined 2 walls, filled with volumes that looked red rather than decorative, which surprised her. The desk was massive, dark wood, positioned to face the door so that whoever sat behind it would see you before you saw them. A power arrangement. Everything in this house was a power arrangement. Stephen Cruz sat behind that desk reviewing documents, his dark hair falling slightly across his forehead in a way that made Samantha's chest constrict because she recognized the gesture that had caused it. He had been running his fingers through his hair. A nervous habit. He used to do it during late nights in his office when a deal was not coming together, or during phone calls with his mother that left him tense and quiet for hours afterward. 7 years, and he still did the same thing with his hair when he was stressed. At 34, he had sharpened. The boyish angles she remembered had given way to something harder, more defined, more deliberate. His jaw carried tension like a structural element, as if it was the thing holding the rest of his face in place. He wore a charcoal shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and his watch caught the afternoon light when he moved. She recognized the brand. It cost more than she would earn in 2 years. He looked up, and everything that happened next took less than 5 seconds, but Samantha would remember each fraction of those seconds for the rest of her life. First, the professional assessment, his eyes registering a new staff member, the automatic scan of appearance, posture, presentation, all normal, all routine. Then, the recognition. It moved through his body like an electrical current, the slight jerk of his head, the way his hand froze mid-page turn, fingers still pinching the corner of a document he would never finish reading, the color draining from his face like someone had pulled a plug, and then flooding back twice as fast, turning his skin a shade she had never seen on him before. His lips parted. No sound came out. For a man who had built a telecommunications empire on the power of his voice, who had delivered keynote addresses to rooms of 5,000 people without breaking, a sweat who had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions with the kind of calm that made other men feel small, he was suddenly, completely, devastatingly wordless. Samantha spoke first, because someone had to, and because she had practiced this moment so many times in the mirror that the words came out shaped by discipline rather than emotion. Mr. Cruz, I am Samantha Johnson. The agency sent me for the personal attendant position. She watched him try to assemble a response from the wreckage of his composure. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. His eyes moved across her face like he was reading something written in a language he thought he had forgotten. Samantha, he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like something unearthed, like a fossil pulled from sediment, like an artifact from a dig site that everyone had assumed was empty. What are you? How? I applied through Prestige Staffing, she said. Her voice was level. Professional, giving nothing. Your household coordinator approved my references last week. I understand you would like to conduct a final interview. She was handing him a script, a framework for surviving this moment without either of them detonating in front of whoever might be within earshot. He seemed to understand, because he straightened in his chair and gestured to the seat across from him with a hand that did not quite hold steady. "Yes, please. Sit down." She sat. The chair was leather, expensive, uncomfortable in the way that luxury furniture often is, designed to look inviting while keeping you alert. She placed her hands in her lap, fingers interlaced. Still, he stared at her for a beat too long, then looked down at his desk where her file lay open. "Your references are excellent," he said, and she could hear him constructing normalcy word by word, brick by brick, the way a man builds a wall when the water is already rising. 3 years with the Harrington family in Charleston, 2 years with the Delaney estate in Savannah. Both households gave you exceptional marks. "I take my work seriously," Samantha replied. "You always did." The words slipped out before he could catch them. They both felt the shift in the room, the temperature dropping or rising, she could not tell which. The professional veneer had cracked, just slightly, just enough to let something old and unresolved seep through like water finding the lowest point in a floor. "Mr. Cruz," she began. "Stephen," he said. "Mr. Cruz," she repeated. The boundary was a wall. She needed it to hold. "I am here for a position. If my history with you creates a conflict, I understand completely. I can contact the agency and request a different placement." She said it knowing that she could not afford a different placement. She said it knowing that Daniel needed shoes and Rosa needed medication and the transmission was getting worse every week. She said it because she needed him to understand that she would walk away from $4,200 a month before she would walk away from her dignity. She had done it before. She would do it again. No, the word came fast, almost involuntary. He caught himself, recalibrated, and when he spoke again his voice was more controlled, but not entirely convincing. "No, there is no conflict. That was years ago. We are both different people now. 7 years, Samantha thought. 7 years since a girl from Overtown fell in love with the heir to Cruz Communications during a summer internship that was supposed to teach her about corporate media strategy and instead taught her about the distance between what powerful men promise in private and what they choose in public. "The position is yours," Stephen said. His voice was steady now, or at least performing steadiness well enough to pass. "Maria will want to meet you this evening. She is particular about her staff. So, I have been told." He studied her face one more time with an intensity that made her skin prickle, as if he was trying to memorize her in case she disappeared again. She let him look. She gave him nothing back. "If you have any questions about the household or your responsibilities, Gloria can assist you," he said. "Thank you, Mr. Cruz." She stood. She turned. She walked to the door. "Samantha." She stopped. Did not turn around. "It is good to see you." She paused for exactly 1 second. Then she opened the door and walked through it and continued down that beautiful silent hallway without looking back. Her spine was straight. Her steps were measured. Her face was composed. And her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Before I continue with what happened next in that house, before I tell you about the woman waiting for Samantha downstairs and the secret that was ticking like a clock inside every interaction, I need to talk to you for a moment. If you have ever walked into a room knowing that the person on the other side of the desk held power over your paycheck, your future, your ability to feed your child, and you stood there anyway with your back straight and your voice level and your dignity intact, then you already understand something about Samantha Johnson that most people never will. Strength is not the absence of fear. Strength is ironing your blouse at 4:45 in the morning when your checking account has $400 in it and your mother's hands are shaking and your son is dreaming about sharks and you are about to walk into the one place on earth that could destroy everything you have built. If that resonates with you, if you know what it feels like to carry something too heavy and keep walking anyway, hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who has been the strong one for so long they have forgotten what it feels like to put the weight down. Subscribe to Mr. Dawson Stories and turn on notifications, because I promise you what happens next in this house is going to test everything you think you know about forgiveness, about family, and about whether people who failed you once deserve the chance to try again. Now, let me tell you about Maria. She was not what Samantha expected, and that was the problem. Samantha had spent 7 years constructing a version of Maria Vega in her mind, the woman Stephen's mother had chosen for him. The appropriate match, as Vivian Cruz had called her, with the kind of emphasis that made appropriate sound like the only word that mattered, and everything else, everything Samantha had been and felt and offered, sound like a deviation from the correct answer. In Samantha's imagination, Maria was cold, imperious, The kind of woman who treated staff like furniture and wore her privilege like a weapon. It would have been easier that way. It is always easier to resent a villain than to resent a person. But the woman who met Samantha in the master suite at 6 o'clock that evening was not a villain. She was something much more complicated. She was lonely. Samantha saw it within the first 5 minutes. It sat behind Maria's eyes like a tenant who had been there so long it had become part of the architecture. You could miss it if you were not looking. Most people were not looking. Most people saw the dark hair that fell in perfect waves, the cheekbones that could have been sculpted by a Renaissance artist, the silk blouse that draped across her shoulders like it had been born there. They saw a woman who belonged to this world, who moved through it with the languid confidence of someone who had never once questioned whether she was in the right place. Samantha saw all of that, but she also saw the way Maria's smile did not quite reach her eyes, the way she talked too much during silences, as if silence was a room she did not want to be left alone in, the way she touched the engagement ring on her left hand, not admiring it but adjusting it like it did not quite fit. "Follow me," Maria said, leading Samantha through a closet that was larger than the apartment where Daniel slept. Racks of clothes organized by color, then by season, then by occasion. Shoes arranged on custom shelving like artifacts in a museum. Handbags displayed in glass cases with individual lighting. It was beautiful and excessive and quietly sad, though Samantha could not have explained why. "I will need you here by 6 each morning," Maria said, pulling items from the racks with the practiced ease of someone who had spent a lifetime being dressed by other people. "My coffee is at 6:30. Oat milk, no sugar, in the blue cup, not the white one." She paused, holding a blouse up to the light to inspect it. Stephen bought the white ones, a whole set of them, very expensive, hand-painted by some artisan in Portugal. They are objectively beautiful, and I hate them, but I cannot tell him that because he will make that face. "What face?" Samantha asked, before she could stop herself. Maria glanced at her with something like surprise, as if she was not used to staff engaging with her observations. "The disappointed one. Like you have just told him the world is not as good as he thought it was. He is sensitive under all that corporate steel. But I suppose you would not know that." "No," Samantha said. "I would not." The lie sat in her mouth like a stone. She knew exactly what face Maria was describing. She had seen it the night Stephen's mother had told him that the summer intern he had been spending time with was not suitable for continued association with the family. He had made that exact face, like the world had subtracted something from itself, and he was trying to figure out where it went, but he had not fought. That was the part Samantha could never forget. He had made the face, and then he had let it happen. "You are from Miami," Maria said, moving to the vanity and sitting down. Not a question. A statement delivered while examining her own reflection with the clinical detachment of someone evaluating a product. "Originally, yes, and you came back. People do not usually come back to places they have left, not unless they have to." The observation was sharper than Samantha had anticipated. She filed it away, a reminder not to underestimate the woman she was serving. "My mother is ill," Samantha said. It was true, though it was only one thread in a tapestry of reasons that included Daniel's need for stability, the agency's placement, the $4,200 a month that stood between her family and financial collapse. "I needed to be closer." "I am sorry to hear that," Maria said, and she sounded like she meant it. The sincerity was unexpected and disarming. "Family is complicated." "It is." Maria was quiet for a moment, running her fingers along the edge of the vanity. Then she spoke again, and what she said landed in the room like something dropped from a height. "Mine wants me to marry Stephen by December. His wants the wedding in spring. Nobody has asked me what I want." The words hung between them. Maria blinked, then laughed. A short, self-conscious sound, like someone catching themselves saying something they had not meant to say out loud. "Ignore me. I do not usually talk to staff like this. Something about you makes me forget the rules." "I will take that as a compliment," Samantha said carefully. "You should." Maria turned back to her reflection, and the moment passed. But something had shifted in the room. Some invisible boundary had been crossed, not by force, but by accident, the way most important boundaries are crossed. And Samantha found herself standing in territory she had not prepared for. Not the hostile ground of a rival, not the neutral ground of a stranger. Something in between. Something that felt dangerously like the beginning of understanding. She had prepared to dislike Maria. She had needed to dislike Maria, because disliking Maria made the story simple. The other woman, the replacement, the one who got the life Samantha was denied. Clean categories, clear enemies. The kind of narrative that lets you sleep at night because you know exactly where your anger belongs. But this woman standing in her oversized closet, wearing silk that cost thousands and loneliness that cost more, was not a villain. She was another casualty of the same machine. And that complicated everything. That first week, Samantha learned the rhythms of the Cruz estate the way a musician learns a new piece of music. By listening, by watching, by feeling for the beats and the pauses and the places where the tempo changed without warning. She learned that Maria woke slowly, reluctantly, like someone surfacing from a dream she preferred to real life. That she drank her coffee in silence for exactly 12 minutes before she was ready for conversation. That she smiled most genuinely when she was on the phone with her younger sister in New York, and most performatively when she was on the phone with her mother, who called every day to discuss wedding details that Maria responded to with the enthusiasm of someone reviewing a contract she had not volunteered to sign. She learned that Stephen left for his office at 7:30 each morning and returned at varying times in the evening, sometimes 6, sometimes 9, sometimes not at all. That he ate dinner alone in the kitchen more often than he ate with Maria in the dining room. That he moved through his own house like a guest who had overstayed his welcome and was trying not to be noticed. And she learned, through careful observation and the kind of attention that domestic workers develop out of professional necessity and personal survival, that Stephen Cruz was avoiding her with the deliberate, calculated precision of a man defusing a bomb. He left rooms when she entered them, not obviously, not dramatically, just a quiet excuse, a sudden phone call, a remembered obligation that drew him elsewhere exactly when Samantha appeared. He redirected communication through Gloria, sending instructions and schedules through the head of household rather than delivering them himself. When their paths crossed in hallways, he stepped aside with more space than physics required, pressing himself against the wall as if contact between them might trigger some kind of detonation. He was afraid of her, not of Samantha herself, but of what she represented. The road not taken, the choice not made, the door he had watched close 7 years ago and had apparently never stopped staring at. But he also watched her. She felt his gaze constantly. Across the kitchen when she was preparing Maria's breakfast. Through the window of his study when she crossed the courtyard to the garden. From the top of the staircase when she walked to the main floor below, checking that everything was in order before Maria came down. He watched her the way people watch fires, with fascination and fear in equal measure. And Samantha let him watch, because she understood something about power that Stephen, for all his billions, had never learned. The person who needs something from the situation is always at a disadvantage. And right now, Stephen Cruz needed something from Samantha. He needed her to be a stranger. He needed their history to stay buried. He needed the woman making his fiancée's coffee to be just a name on an agency form, and nothing more. And Samantha held that power quietly, the way she held everything, with precision. With control, with the knowledge that the secret she carried was worth more than every painting, every car, every square foot of limestone and glass in this entire monstrous, beautiful, desperately lonely house. She just had not decided yet what she was going to do with it. It was Maria, ironically, who began to dissolve the careful distance Samantha had constructed between herself and the emotional reality of this household. Because Maria kept talking, not about important things, not at first, about the wedding flowers and the seating chart, and the caterer who could not understand that dairy-free meant all dairy, not just the obvious dairy. Surface-level observations delivered in a tone that was equal parts exasperation and amusement. But gradually, as the days accumulated and Samantha proved herself reliable and discreet, the observations deepened. The surface cracked, and what leaked through was not what Samantha expected. "He's a good man," Maria said one evening, while Samantha was laying out options for the next day's wardrobe. She said it casually, as if commenting on the weather, but her eyes in the mirror told a different story. Samantha waited. She had learned that silence was often more useful than response. "But I do not think he is mine," Maria continued. "I do not think he has ever been fully present. Not with me, not with anyone. Like part of him is always somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? Like he is standing right next to you, and he is also 1,000 miles away, and you cannot reach the part of him that went there because he does not even know it left." "That is difficult," Samantha said, the most neutral response she could construct while her pulse hammered in her throat. "It is, Maria agreed. She turned from the mirror and looked at Samantha directly, the most honest I have seen her in 2 weeks of daily contact. Do you think people can love someone and still be missing? Still be gone somewhere inside themselves that the other person cannot follow? I think people are complicated, Samantha replied, and I think sometimes the missing has nothing to do with the person standing next to them. Sometimes it is about something that happened before. Maria considered this. Something that happened before, she repeated. You are probably right. Everyone has a before. Even Stephen, though he never talks about his. Whatever is in that box, he has sealed it shut with more locks than I can count. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that people use when the alternative is something they are not ready to show. Anyway, thank you for listening to me. I know it is not in your job description. You would be surprised what is in the job description, Samantha said. Maria laughed. A real one this time. And Samantha felt something she had not expected to feel in this house. Guilt. Because the sealed box Maria was describing, the place where Stephen had gone that Maria could not reach, Samantha knew exactly what was in it. She knew because she was in it, and her son was in it, and 7 years of silence was in it, and every day she spent in this house, making coffee in the blue cup and laying out silk blouses and listening to Maria describe the emptiness she felt in her own engagement. The weight of that sealed box grew heavier, not because keeping the secret was hard. Samantha had been keeping secrets since she was 21. She was expert at it, but because for the first time, keeping the secret did not feel like protection. It felt like cruelty. And the person it was cruelest to was the woman handing Samantha her trust one small confession at a time, never knowing that the maid folding her clothes was the reason her fiancé could not be fully present in his own life. 3 weeks into her employment at the Cruz estate, Samantha had memorized every detail of Maria's life with the kind of thoroughness that would have impressed an intelligence operative. She knew that Maria preferred her bath at exactly 7:15 in the evening, with lavender oil, not eucalyptus. She knew that Maria read before bed but never finished books, leaving them face down on the nightstand at the moment when the story required the most from her emotionally, as if she could not bear to see how things turned out. She knew that Maria called her sister every Tuesday and Thursday and laughed more during those calls than she laughed during entire days spent in this house. She also knew that Maria was becoming attached to her, not in the way of an employer who values a competent employee, in the way of a woman who has been surrounded by people who want something from her for so long that she has forgotten what it feels like when someone simply listens. And Samantha listened. That was the problem. She listened because listening was her job. She listened because listening was her nature. And she listened because somewhere between the blue coffee cup and the unsent wedding invitations and the evenings when Maria sat in her closet surrounded by $10,000 worth of clothing and said, I do not know who I am when I am not being what everyone else needs me to be, Samantha had started to care about this woman, which made what was coming so much worse. It was a Thursday evening in the 4th week when Gloria informed Samantha that her presence would be required at the Carvalho benefit the following Saturday. A charity event, art gallery, 300 guests, the kind of evening that required military precision behind the scenes so that everything appeared effortless in front of the cameras. Miss Maria will need you from 4 o'clock for preparation, Gloria explained. Hair, makeup, wardrobe coordination. You will accompany her to the venue and remain available throughout the evening for any needs that arise. Samantha nodded. Of course. Maria mentioned it again that evening while Samantha was organizing the next day's schedule. You will need to bring something appropriate to change into, Maria said. You will be backstage essentially. But these events have a way of pulling everyone into the current. People circulate. Boundaries blur. The line between staff and guest gets thin after enough champagne, and I would rather you looked the part than stood out for the wrong reasons. Understood. Maria hesitated, then added something that seemed to cost her a small piece of pride. Also, I would appreciate it if you stayed close. These events make me anxious. Stephen is wonderful at them. He moves through a room like he was designed for it. Handshakes and small talk and that smile he does that makes everyone feel like they are the only person in the world. But I am not like that. I get lost in rooms like that, and it would help to have someone nearby who does not expect me to perform. I will be right there, Samantha said, and she meant it, which was the cruelest part of all. Saturday arrived wrapped in the kind of Miami heat that turned the air itself into something you had to push through. Samantha spent the afternoon in Maria's suite, coordinating the preparation with the hairstylist and makeup artist who arrived at 4 o'clock sharp, carrying cases that looked like they contained surgical equipment. Maria sat in her chair with the patient stillness of someone who had been beautified by professionals since childhood. Her eyes met Samantha's in the mirror occasionally, and each time Samantha saw the anxiety beneath the calm. Not vanity anxiety, not the fear of looking wrong. Something deeper. The fear of being seen and found insufficient by 300 people who were measuring her against a standard she had never agreed to. The gown was emerald green, floor length, the kind of dress that required a specific posture and a specific confidence and a specific understanding that when you wore something like this, you were not just attending an event. You were becoming part of the architecture of it. Maria stepped into it, and Samantha zipped the back, and for a moment they both looked at Maria's reflection in the full-length mirror. "You look stunning," Samantha said. And it was true. Maria was objectively, undeniably beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made rooms rearrange themselves around her. "I look like someone who costs a lot of money," Maria replied quietly, "which I suppose is the point." Stephen appeared at the bedroom door at 6:15. Dark suit. Perfect fit. The kind of man who made formal wear look like something he'd been born wearing. His eyes found Maria first, and he smiled. "You look incredible." "Thank you." Maria's response was polite, but did not carry the warmth of someone receiving a compliment from the person they loved. It carried the courtesy of someone accepting a professional assessment. Then Stephen's eyes moved to Samantha, standing 3 feet behind Maria with a garment bag over one arm and Maria's clutch in her hand. The smile did not disappear, but it changed. It became something held rather than given, something controlled rather than felt. "Miss Johnson will be accompanying us," Maria said, not noticing the shift. "I need her at the venue." "Of course," Stephen said. His voice was perfectly even. "Shall we?" They drove to the Carvalho Gallery in the back of a black sedan with a driver who navigated the Miami evening traffic with the silent competence of someone accustomed to transporting people who expected the world to move out of their way. Samantha sat in the front passenger seat. Stephen and Maria sat in the back. Through the partition, Samantha could hear fragments of their conversation. Maria reviewing the guest list, Stephen confirming which donors he planned to speak with. The practice choreography of 2 people who functioned as a unit without functioning as a couple. The gallery was a converted warehouse in Wynwood, transformed for the evening into something that looked like the inside of a very expensive dream. White walls, strategic lighting, art installations that Samantha suspected cost more than her mother's house and the entire block it sat on. 300 people in formal attire holding champagne glasses at precise angles, performing interest in contemporary art while actually performing interest in each other. Samantha moved into her role like water finding its level. She positioned herself 3 steps behind Maria, close enough to respond to any need, far enough to be unobtrusive. She held Maria's clutch. She managed Maria's phone, which vibrated constantly with messages Maria did not want to read. She fetched water when Maria's champagne went untouched, understanding without being told that Maria did not want to drink but did not want to explain why. She was a ghost, present but unseen, essential but invisible, existing in that liminal space that service workers occupy at events like these, the space between the people who matter and the walls that hold them. Stephen moved through the room exactly the way Maria had described, like he was designed for it, every handshake calibrated, every laugh authentic enough to pass. He touched the small of Maria's back when they stood together, a gesture that looked intimate from across the room, but that Samantha, standing close enough to see the details, recognized as choreography rather than instinct. He did not look at Samantha, not once, not even a glance. The avoidance was so complete that it became its own kind of presence, a shape defined by the space around it. 2 hours into the event, Samantha stepped into a service corridor to check her phone. She had been fighting the urge for an hour, but the anxiety of being away from Daniel always intensified in the evening. Bedtime was when he needed her most. Bedtime was when the questions came, the fears surfaced, the small vulnerabilities that 6-year-old boys spend all day suppressing finally found their way out. One missed call from Rosa. One text message. She opened the text and felt her blood go cold. Daniel fell at the park, cut on his forehead, bleeding a lot. He is asking for you. Come home. Samantha's hands did not shake. They wanted to. Every nerve in her body was firing signals that translated to run, but her hands stayed steady because her hands had learned a long time ago that shaking was a luxury she could not afford. She called Rosa. The phone rang twice. Mija, how bad is it? It looks worse than it is. Head wounds bleed. You know this, but it is deep enough that he might need stitches, and he is scared and he wants you. He keeps asking where you are. I am coming. 20 minutes. Keep pressure on it. Clean cloth. Firm, but not too tight. Talk to him. Tell him I am on my way. Hurry, Samantha. I am coming right now. She ended the call, turned toward the main gallery to find Gloria or someone who could relay a message to Maria, and found instead that Stephen Cruz was standing 6 feet behind her in the corridor. He was holding 2 glasses of water, which meant he had come back here for a mundane reason: to hydrate, to take a break from performing, to stand in a quiet hallway for 30 seconds and remember what his face felt like when it was not smiling for strangers. But the look on his face was not mundane. He had heard some, maybe not the whole conversation, but enough. The tone, the urgency, the word that had slipped past Samantha's defenses in the panic of the moment. Is everything all right? He asked. His voice was careful, the way people's voices get when they already know the answer, but need to hear it confirmed. I need to leave, Samantha said. She was already calculating logistics, distance to Rosa's house, availability of a ride share at this hour, whether she should tell Maria first or ask Gloria to relay the message. My son fell and he needs me. I have to go now. The word landed. Your son. 2 words. Ordinary in any other context. But in this corridor, between these 2 people, with 7 years of unspoken history pressing against the walls, those 2 words detonated with the force of something that had been buried too long and too deep. Stephen's face went through the same transformation Samantha had witnessed in his study on her first day, but slower this time, more detailed. She could see each stage of it, as if watching a building come apart floor by floor. First, the confusion. She has a son. Then the calculation. A son. How old? Then the arithmetic, working backward from the present through months and years to a summer that smelled like salt air and jasmine, and the particular electricity of 2 people who had not yet learned what it cost to love without protection. How old is he? Stephen said. The words came out hoarse, like they had scraped against something on the way up. Stephen, I do not have time for this right now. My child is bleeding. How old? He is 6. She watched the number hit him, watched him do the math she had done 6 years ago in a gas station bathroom in Savannah, staring at a plastic stick that showed 2 lines where she had desperately needed to see one. 6 years old, conceived 7 years ago, during a summer that ended with his mother's ultimatum and Samantha's disappearance and a silence so total it had swallowed an entire human being. I am driving you, Stephen said. That is not necessary. I am driving you, he repeated, and the words were not an offer. They were a declaration, the voice of a man who had just realized that the most important thing in his life was happening 10 miles away in a house he had never seen, and he could not spend 1 more second standing in a corridor holding 2 glasses of water that did not matter. They left through the service entrance. Stephen did not tell Maria. He did not tell Gloria. He did not tell anyone. He walked out of a charity benefit where his name was on the donor wall and his fiancée was standing in an emerald gown waiting for him to return with water, and he got into his car and drove toward Little Havana like the road itself owed him speed. The Aston Martin moved through rain-slicked streets with the precise aggression of a vehicle that cost $300,000 driven by a man who had forgotten he owned it. Samantha sat in the passenger seat giving directions. Left on 8th, right on 17th, straight for 6 blocks, then left again at the church with the blue door. They did not speak. The silence between them was so dense it had texture, weight, dimension. It was the silence of 2 people who both knew that the next hour would change the shape of every hour that came after it. Stephen's hands gripped the steering wheel like he was holding onto the edge of something. His knuckles were white. His jaw was locked. He drove with his eyes fixed on the road, but Samantha could see that he was not seeing the road. He was seeing numbers, dates, a calendar counting backward through 7 years to a summer that he had probably replayed 10,000 times, never knowing that it had produced something more permanent than regret. Turn here, Samantha said. The yellow house on the left. He pulled up to Rosa's house, a small, clean structure with a chain-link fence and a porch light that illuminated a Virgin Mary statue surrounded by marigolds. It was a different universe from Star Island, a different planet from the gallery they had just left. The distance between this house and the Cruz estate could not be measured in miles. It was measured in assumptions, in access, in the brutal arithmetic of who gets what in a world that distributes everything unequally and calls it natural. Samantha was out of the car before it fully stopped. She heard Stephen's door open behind her, but she did not wait for him. She could not wait for anyone right now. Her son was bleeding and scared and asking for her, and everything else, every secret, every strategy, every carefully maintained wall, was irrelevant compared to the primal, non-negotiable imperative of getting to her child. The front door was unlocked. Rosa stood in the living room doorway, her trembling hands pressed together, her face carrying the particular anguish of a grandmother who wants to fix everything and cannot fix this. "He is on the couch," Rosa said. He calmed down a little. "But he wants you. He keeps saying, 'Mama.'" Samantha moved past her into the living room. Daniel was lying on the couch with a cloth pressed against his forehead. His dark eyes were red from crying, but dry now, the tears having exhausted themselves the way children's tears do, arriving in floods and departing suddenly, leaving behind a stillness that is somehow worse than the noise. He saw her, and his whole body changed. The tension dissolved. The fear released. His face crumpled into the specific expression of a child who has been brave for as long as he can manage and has finally been given permission to stop. "Mama," he breathed, and crawled into her arms. "I am here, baby. I am right here. Let me see." She sat on the couch and held him in her lap, gently moving the cloth to examine the cut. It was on his forehead, just above his left eyebrow, about 2 inches long. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but the wound was open enough to need attention. Butterfly strips at minimum, possibly stitches. She worked with steady hands, cleaning the wound with supplies Rosa had already laid out, applying antiseptic while Daniel winced and gripped her shirt, placing butterfly strips along the cut with the precision of someone who had treated enough childhood injuries to operate on autopilot while her mind processed everything else happening in the room. "You are being so brave," she told him. "So brave. This is going to heal, and you are going to have a very impressive scar, and every kid at school is going to want to know the story." "I tripped on the curb," Daniel said, his voice small and embarrassed. "It was not even a cool fall. I just tripped." "All the best scars come from ordinary moments," Samantha said. "That is what makes them interesting. Anyone can get a scar from something dramatic. It takes a special person to get one from a curb." Daniel almost smiled. Almost. Then he looked past Samantha's shoulder, and the almost smile disappeared, replaced by something more cautious, more watchful. The expression of a child who has learned that strangers in his house usually means something is wrong. "Mama, who is that?" Samantha did not have to turn around to know what Daniel was seeing. She could feel Stephen's presence in the doorway the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Heavy, charged, inevitable. She turned. Stephen stood at the threshold of Rosa's living room, and he was looking at Daniel the way Samantha had seen people look at eclipses, with awe and terror and the understanding that what they were witnessing was something that happened maybe once in a lifetime and changed the quality of light forever after. His eyes moved over Daniel's face. She watched him see it. Every feature he was cataloging without knowing he was doing it. His own eyes looking back at him from a child's face. His own jaw in miniature. His own habit of going completely still when processing something important, reflected in a 6-year-old boy who was studying this stranger with the same analytical intensity the stranger was studying him. "He looks like me," Stephen said. His voice cracked on the last word. Not the controlled crack of a man managing emotion, the real crack. The structural failure. The sound of something inside him giving way under a weight it was never designed to hold. Samantha opened her mouth to say something. What? She did not know. An explanation, a defense, a redirect. Anything to manage this moment the way she had managed every moment for 7 years with precision and control and the careful suppression of everything that could not be safely felt. But Rosa spoke first. "He should," Rosa said from the kitchen doorway. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was not. She stood with the quiet ferocity of a woman who had watched her daughter carry an impossible burden for 7 years and had decided in this moment in her own kitchen that the carrying was done. "He should look like you. He is yours." "Mama," Samantha said. The word was a warning. "No, mija." Rosa stepped forward. Her small frame seemed to expand with the force of what she was saying. 7 years is long enough for secrets. He is standing in my house. He is looking at his son. Let him see what he should have seen a long time ago. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that exists at the center of hurricanes. Absolute, temporary, surrounded on all sides by destruction that has not yet arrived but is coming and cannot be stopped. Daniel looked from Stephen to Samantha to Rosa and back to Stephen, processing, calculating, doing the math that 6-year-olds do, which is not about numbers but about faces and tones and the invisible currents that run between adults when something important is happening. "Mama," Daniel said quietly, "is that my dad? I need to stop right here, right in this moment, because what just happened in that room is something that cannot be rushed past or narrated over or treated as just another plot point." A 6-year-old boy who has never met his father just looked at a stranger and knew. Not because anyone told him, not because of a photograph or a story or an explanation. He knew because children see what adults spend years trying to hide. They see the truth that lives beneath the performance, beneath the secrets, beneath the carefully constructed architecture of lies we build to protect ourselves from the consequences of our own choices. If that moment hit you, if you felt something crack in your chest when that little boy asked that question, if you know what it is like to be in a room where a secret finally breaks free after years of containment, I need you to hit that like button right now, not for the algorithm, for the truth that this story is telling about what happens when we try to protect people by keeping them in the dark and what happens when the light finally gets in anyway. Share this with someone who understands that the hardest secrets are not the ones we keep from our enemies. They are the ones we keep from the people we love. Subscribe to Mr. Dawson Stories and turn on that notification bell, because what happens next, when Stephen learns why Samantha kept this secret, when he discovers what his own mother did 7 years ago, is going to change everything you think you know about who the real villain of this story is. Now, let me take you to the next morning, to a café in Coconut Grove, where 2 people with 7 years of silence between them are about to say everything they have been holding. The café was small, 12 tables, tile floors, the kind of place where the coffee is strong and the air conditioning works, but just barely, and the noise level is high enough to give conversations a layer of privacy. Samantha chose it for exactly that reason. She did not want a quiet restaurant where every word carried. She wanted background noise, buffer, the acoustic equivalent of a wall she could stand behind if things got too close. She arrived 20 minutes early, ordered black coffee she would not drink, sat at a corner table with her back to the wall, which was a habit she had developed in her first year of single motherhood, when every room felt like it had too many exits and not enough. Her hands were folded on the table, fingers interlaced. Still, she had slept for 45 minutes the night before. Not because of anxiety, although anxiety was certainly present, but because her brain would not stop replaying the moment in Rosa's living room. Daniel's question, Stephen's face, the sound his voice made when it broke, and underneath all of that, the question she had been asking herself since she walked out of the Cruz estate 7 years ago. Did I do the right thing? She still did not have an answer. She was not sure she ever would. Stephen arrived at exactly the agreed time. She saw him through the window before he entered. Standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, staring at the cafe door the way someone stares at a threshold they know they cannot uncross once they step through it. He came in. He looked terrible. Not in the way wealthy people look terrible, which usually means they are wearing last season's watch or their hair is slightly imperfect. He looked terrible in the way real people look terrible when the world has broken something inside them that they did not know could break. His shirt was wrinkled. She had never seen Stephen Cruz wear a wrinkled shirt. Not once in the entire time she had known him. His eyes were red-rimmed. His jaw carried the shadow of a beard he had not bothered to shave, and the lines around his mouth were deeper than they had been 12 hours ago, as if the night had aged him in ways that years of running a corporation had not managed. He sat down across from her, did not order anything, did not make small talk, did not reach for any of the social conventions that people use to delay the moment when they have to say the thing they came to say. "Tell me everything," he said. From the beginning, Samantha looked at him. At this man she had loved with everything she had at 21 and had spent 7 years trying to unlove with varying degrees of failure. He was asking for the truth, all of it, and he deserved it, not because he had earned it, but because their son deserved a father who understood exactly why he had been absent. So she told him. She started with the summer, not the love story version, not the version she had replayed in her weaker moments, the one filled with rooftop sunsets and late-night conversations, and the way his laugh sounded when it was real instead of performed. She told him the practical version, the version that had consequences, I was 21, she said. An intern in your corporate communications division. You were 27 and being groomed to take over the company. We were not supposed to happen. I knew that. You knew that. But we happened anyway. He did not interrupt. He sat with his hands flat on the table and listened the way he should have listened 7 years ago when his mother sat him down and rearranged his life without his permission. It lasted 3 months, Samantha continued, June through August. And in those 3 months, you told me things I had never heard from anyone. That I was brilliant. That I challenged you. That you had never met someone who made you want to be better instead of just bigger. You said those exact words, better instead of bigger. I remember them because I wrote them down. The night you said them, in a notebook I still have, which is either sentimental or pathetic, depending on your perspective. Samantha, let me finish. You asked for everything. This is everything. He closed his mouth, nodded. In August, your mother found out about us. I do not know how. I never asked. It did not matter. What mattered was what she did with the information. She sat me down in your house, in the East Wing study, the one with the mahogany desk. She offered me tea. She was very polite about it. Cruz is always polite when she is destroying something. It is one of her most effective qualities. Samantha paused, took a breath that was not about oxygen but about steadying herself against the memory, which still carried edges sharp enough to cut even after 7 years of handling it. She told me that your future had been arranged, that Maria Vega was the appropriate match. She used that word, appropriate, as if love was a job interview and I had submitted an insufficient resume. She told me that whatever you had said to me during the summer was the talk of a boy who had not yet learned the weight of his last name. And then she gave me a choice. Leave quietly or be removed publicly. She offered money. I did not take it. You left, Stephen said. His voice was barely audible. I left. That night, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and drove to Savannah because my college roommate lived there, and it was the farthest I could get without a plane ticket. I did not say goodbye to you. I did not explain. I did not fight. I just left. Why? Stephen asked, and the word came out raw, stripped of every defense he had ever built. Why did you not come to me? Not my mother, me. Why did you not tell me what she said and let me make my own choice? Because I knew what you would choose, Samantha said. The words were quiet, but they landed like stones dropped into still water, each one sending ripples outward. Your mother made it very clear, and I believed her. Maybe I should not have, but I was 21 years old. I was an intern with $40,000 in student debt and a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. And she was Cruz. She had been running your life since before you could walk, and you let her. That was the part I could not get past. Not that she tried to control you. Parents do that. But that you let her. You never fought her on anything. Not the company. Not the engagement. Not me. She watched him absorb this. Watched the words enter him and do their damage, which was considerable but necessary, the way surgery is necessary, causing controlled harm to prevent something worse. I did not know, Stephen said. She told me you left because you decided the relationship was not what you wanted. She said you took a job offer in another city and chose your career. She said you asked her not to give me your new contact information because you wanted a clean break. And I believed her, because it was easier to believe that you chose to leave than to ask why you would. Samantha's jaw tightened. Vivian told you I asked for a clean break. Yes, and you did not find that strange. That a woman who spent 3 months telling you she loved you would suddenly vanish without a word and ask your mother to run interference. I told you. I believed what was easier. I was a coward. I have known that for a long time. I just did not know the full scope of what my cowardice cost. Well, Samantha said, now you do. The silence that followed lasted long enough for the waitress to approach, sense the atmosphere, and retreat without speaking. Whatever was happening at this corner table, it was not the kind of thing you interrupted with questions about refills. When did you find out? Stephen asked. About Daniel. 6 weeks after I left. A gas station bathroom in Savannah. I was on my way to a job interview at a hotel where I was applying to be a front desk clerk. I had been nauseous for 2 weeks and I told myself it was stress. It was not stress, and you did not call me. I picked up the phone 11 times, Samantha said. She heard her own voice catch on the number, which surprised her. She had told this story to herself so many times that she thought it had lost its edges. She was wrong. I picked up the phone 11 times, and I put it down 12, because every time I held that phone, I heard your mother's voice telling me that you would choose the life she planned, and I could not survive hearing you confirm it. I could not survive calling you and saying I am pregnant and hearing silence on the other end. Or worse, hearing you say I will handle it, in that voice you use when something has become a problem to be managed instead of a life to be lived. I would not have said that. You do not know what you would have said. You do not know who you were 7 years ago, Stephen. Not really. You were a man who let his mother choose his wife. You were a man who believed a lie about the woman he claimed to love because the lie was more convenient than the truth. That is who you were, and I could not give my child to that man. I could not risk it. Stephen put his hands over his face, not dramatically, not for effect, with the quiet desperation of someone trying to hold himself together when every seam is splitting. He stayed that way for a long time, long enough that Samantha almost reached across the table, almost touched his wrist, almost offered comfort to the man she had spent 7 years protecting herself from. She did not, but she almost did, and the almost was significant. "What is he like?" Stephen said from behind his hands. His voice was muffled and thick. "He is extraordinary," Samantha said, and this time her voice did not catch. It steadied, because this was the part of the story where she stood on solid ground. This was the part she knew. He's curious about everything. He wants to know how things work, why the ocean has tides, why buildings do not fall down, whether sharks can open doors. He is careful with people. He watches before he speaks. He does not trust easily, which I wish I could say was just his personality, but I know it is also what happens when a child grows up without a father and learns to be cautious about who stays and who leaves. "Does he ask about me?" Stephen said. "About his father?" "Sometimes. Less than he used to. When he was 4, he went through a phase where every man we passed on the street was a potential candidate. He would ask me, 'Is that my dad? What about that one?' It stopped when he was 5. I think he just got tired of the answer always being no." Stephen made a sound that Samantha could not categorize. It was not a word. It was not a sob. It was the sound of something structural failing, a load-bearing wall that had been holding up a version of his life that no longer existed. He lowered his hands. His eyes were red, but dry. The control was still there, barely, like a dam that knows it is about to break but has not broken yet. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Not defensively, genuinely. "Tell me what you need, and I will do it. Anything. Whatever it takes." Samantha studied him across the table, looking for signs of performance, looking for the polished sincerity that wealthy men deployed when they wanted to appear human without actually committing to the work of being human. She had seen it before, in employers, in donors at charity events, in men who confused writing checks with being present. She did not see it. What she saw instead was a man who looked like he had been taken apart during the night and reassembled incorrectly, all the pieces present but none of them fitting the way they used to. "I want you to choose," Samantha said. "That is what I have always wanted. Not for someone to choose for you, not for circumstances to decide. I want you to look at the situation clearly, with all the information, and make a choice. You can be Daniel's father, really, truly, consistently his father. Not a name on a birth certificate, not a check in the mail, not a man who shows up when it is convenient and disappears when it is complicated. A father, present, reliable, permanent, or you can walk away, cleanly, completely, no guilt, no obligation. I have raised him alone for 6 years. I can raise him alone for 12 more. He is loved. He is safe. He is mine. And I will never hold it against you if you decide that fatherhood is not something you are willing to commit to. But you do not get to be halfway in. That is the one thing I will not accept. Halfway is worse than nothing. Halfway teaches a child that he is worth showing up for sometimes, but not always, and I will not let my son learn that lesson." "I want to be his father," Stephen said immediately. "You want that right now, in this moment, with the shock making everything feel urgent and important. But Stephen, fatherhood is not a quarterly report. You cannot delegate it when it gets boring. You cannot restructure it when it does not perform the way you expected. This is a 6-year-old boy who will need you on the days when you are tired and overwhelmed and wondering why you signed up for this. Can you show up on those days? Yes. Can you show up when your mother tells you this is a mistake and you should walk away?" His jaw tightened. "Yes. Can you show up when Daniel does not want you there? because that will happen. He does not know you. He has no reason to trust you. And children do not give trust on demand. They give it in inches over time after you have proven that you are safe. Can you earn it at that pace? Slowly, without guarantees, without the certainty that your effort will be rewarded. Stephen was quiet for a long moment. Not the silence of hesitation, the silence of a man measuring himself against a standard and trying to determine honestly whether he meets it. I do not know if I can do all of that perfectly, he said. But I know I will not stop trying. I know that yesterday I did not know my son existed, and today I cannot imagine my life without knowing him. I know that I have wasted 7 years being the man my mother designed, and I am done with that. I am done choosing easy over right. I am done letting other people make decisions that should have been mine. Pretty words, Samantha said, echoing something she had felt 100 times in the past 7 years. You have always been good with words, Stephen. It was one of the things I loved about you. But words are what got us here. Words are what your mother used to send me away. Words are what you believed instead of coming to find me. So you will understand if I need more than words. Then let me give you more. Tell me what the first step is and I will take it today. The first step is telling Maria. The sentence landed between them like a blade. Stephen closed his eyes. She deserves to know, Samantha continued. Not eventually. Not when the timing is right. Now. Today. She is living in a house with a man who has a child by another woman, and she does not know. I have been standing in her closet every morning handing her coffee in the blue cup because she hates the white ones, and I have been carrying this secret that is hers to know. She trusted me. She talked to me about her life and her fears and her doubts about your relationship, and the entire time I was the reason for half of those doubts. That ends today. You care about her, Stephen said. It was not an accusation. It was an observation delivered with something that sounded like surprise. She is a good person, Samantha said. She did not ask for any of this. She did not choose your mother's plan any more than I did. She deserves honesty, which is more than either of us has given her. Stephen nodded, slowly, the way a man nods when he is agreeing to something that will cost him enormously, and he knows it, and he is choosing to pay anyway. I will tell her tonight, he said. All of it, Samantha pressed. Not the version that makes you look best, the truth. What your mother did, what I did, what you did, all of it, he agreed. They sat in silence for another minute. The cafe noise washed around them. Cups clinking, conversations overlapping, the espresso machine hissing with the mechanical urgency of a device that does not understand that the two people in the corner have just renegotiated the terms of 3 lives. Samantha stood. She left money on the table for the coffee she had not touched. She picked up her bag. Stephen, she said. He looked up at her. One more thing. Whatever you decide to do about Maria, about your life, about the company, that is your business. I am not here to blow up your world. I am here because my son deserves to know where he comes from. The rest is between you and your conscience. She walked out of the cafe and into the Miami heat, which wrapped around her like a second skin. She got into her car. She turned the key. The transmission made its sound, and then she sat in the parking lot for 7 minutes with her forehead pressed against the steering wheel, shaking. Not from fear, from relief. The kind of relief that comes when you have been holding something so tightly for so long that your muscles have forgotten how to release, and when they finally do, the letting go hurts more than the holding ever did. She had told him. After 7 years, she had told him everything. And now the secret she had carried like a second skeleton inside her body was out in the world, loose, uncontainable, moving toward consequences she could not control. All she could do now was what she had always done. Go home, hold her son, wait to see whether this man who had failed her once would fail her again, or whether he was capable of becoming someone worth believing in. She drove to Rosa's house. She walked through the front door. Daniel was at the kitchen table doing homework with the focused intensity of a child who treats every assignment like a personal challenge. Hey, baby, she said. How is your head? He looked up. The butterfly strips were still in place. The bruising had started to bloom purple around the cut. It is fine, he said. Abuela made me soup even though I told her soup does not help cuts. She said it helps everything. I do not think that is scientifically accurate. Samantha sat down next to him and pulled him against her side. He allowed it for 3 seconds, which was generous by 6-year-old boy standards, then wriggled free and returned to his homework. Mama, he said without looking up. That man from last night, the one in the doorway. He looked at me like he knew me, but I have never seen him before. How can someone look at you like they know you when they do not know you? Samantha closed her eyes. Sometimes people see someone and they recognize something, she said, even if they have never met before. Something familiar, something that feels like it belongs to them. Like what? Like the way you tilt your head when you are thinking, Samantha said, or the way you go quiet when you are trying to figure something out. Those things came from somewhere. And sometimes, when someone sees those things for the first time, they feel it, even before they understand it. Daniel considered this with the seriousness he gave to all information. Is he going to come back? Daniel asked. I think so, Samantha said. Would that be okay with you? I do not know yet, Daniel replied honestly. I would have to meet him more than once. You cannot tell if someone is trustworthy from one time. You need at least 3 times, maybe 4. Where did you learn that? From you. You always say trust is not a gift, it is a pattern. Samantha felt her throat tighten. I said that. Every time I ask if we can trust someone new, you say the same thing. Trust is not a gift, it is a pattern. So, I'm going to watch his pattern before I decide. That is very wise, Samantha managed. I know, Daniel said, and went back to his homework. What Stephen did next surprised her. He told Maria everything. That night, not the strategic version, not the sanitized narrative designed to minimize damage and protect his image. The truth, all of it. What his mother had done 7 years ago. What Samantha had carried alone. What he had failed to do, which was everything that mattered. Maria did not scream. She did not throw things. She did not cry, at least not while Stephen was watching. She sat very still in the living room of the Star Island estate, on a couch that cost $15,000, in a house that had never felt like hers, and she absorbed the full weight of a truth that restructured every assumption she had held about her relationship, her fiancé, and the maid who made her coffee in the blue cup every morning. When Stephen finished talking, the silence lasted long enough to hear the ocean through the windows. I always knew, Maria said finally. Her voice was calm in the way that deep water is calm, still on the surface with everything happening underneath. I always knew you were in love with someone else. I just did not know she was living in our house. Stephen did not defend himself. There was nothing to defend. What are you going to do? Maria asked. I'm going to be his father, Stephen said. The boy, Daniel. I'm going to be present in his life, and I understand what that means for us. I understand that everything changes now. Maria nodded slowly. Everything changed a long time ago, Stephen. I have just been waiting for you to notice. The engagement dissolved within the week. Quietly. No public statements. No dramatic confrontations. Maria packed her things with the same grace she had brought to every aspect of her time in this house. She moved with the precision of someone who had always known this was temporary, even when she was trying to believe it was permanent. On her last day at the estate, she found Samantha in the kitchen. Samantha had been avoiding her, unsure whether Maria's grace extended to the woman who had been the catalyst for the dissolution of her engagement. It did. Maria stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at Samantha with an expression that held no anger, no resentment, just the complicated, layered honesty of a woman who had been through something painful and had chosen to metabolize it rather than weaponize it. Take care of that little boy, Maria said, and for what it is worth, take care of him too. He does not know how to take care of himself. He never has. Then she left, and the house felt different after she was gone. Not emptier, cleaner, like something false had been removed, and what remained, while less beautiful, was at least real. But the dominoes were not done falling. Vivian Cruz learned about the dissolution of the engagement 3 days later. She learned about Daniel 4 days after that, and she arrived at the Cruz estate on a Tuesday morning like weather, like a system that had been building offshore for days, gathering force and direction, and the particular cold energy of a woman who had spent 30 years controlling every variable in her family's life and had just discovered a variable she could not control. She was 61, impeccable, silver hair cut in a style that communicated authority the way a uniform communicates rank. She wore cream-colored silk and pearls that were real enough to have a history and expensive enough to have an insurance policy. Her posture was the posture of someone who had never bent, not for circumstance, not for sentiment, not for anything. She swept past Gloria without acknowledgement. walked through the estate with the proprietary confidence of a woman who still considered this her house, despite having deeded it to her son a decade ago. She found Stephen in the kitchen, which was where he spent most of his time now, as if the kitchen, with its functional purpose and lack of pretension, was the only room in the estate where he felt permitted to be a real person. "I assume you know why I am here," Vivian said. Stephen looked at his mother with an expression Samantha would later describe as the moment he stopped being a son and started being a father. "I know exactly why you are here," he said. "And I know exactly what you are going to say. You are going to tell me that this situation is manageable, that the girl and the child can be dealt with, that Maria can be convinced to return, that the narrative can be controlled and the family reputation preserved and everything can go back to the way you designed it." Vivian's expression did not change. She was not the kind of woman whose expression changed in response to other people. She was the kind of woman who decided what her face would do, and then her face did it. "Can we discuss this like adults?" she said. "We can," Stephen replied, "but you might not like what this particular adult has to say. Before we get to what happened next, before I tell you about the confrontation that changed the Cruz family forever, I need to talk to you. We are deep in this story now, deep enough that you can feel it. The weight of what these people are carrying, the choices that led them here, the walls that are coming down, and the ones that are still standing. And I want to ask you something honestly. Do you believe that people can change? Not in theory, not as an inspirational quote on a poster. In practice, in the real, ugly, unglamorous work of looking at who you have been and deciding to become someone different. Because that is what this story is really about. Not money, not secrets, not even love. It is about whether the person you were at your worst gets to define you forever, or whether you get to write a different ending. If you believe in different endings, hit that like button. If you know someone who is fighting right now to become better than the family that raised them, better than the mistakes that shaped them, better than the version of themselves they are most ashamed of, share this video with them. Let them know the fight is worth it. Subscribe to Mr. Dawson Stories and turn on that notification bell, because the next part of this story, the final part, is where we find out whether Stephen Cruz can do the one thing his mother never taught him, choose something real over something easy, and whether Samantha Johnson can do the one thing she has been afraid of for 7 years. Let someone in, now. Let me tell you what happened when Vivian Cruz drove to a small house in Little Havana and tried to buy a child. She went to Rosa's house, not to the estate, not to Stephen's office. She went directly to the source of the problem, because Vivian Cruz had built her life on the principle that problems were solved by applying pressure to the weakest point. She arrived in a black car driven by a man in a suit who opened her door and then waited by the vehicle with the blank expression of someone accustomed to not seeing things. Vivian walked through Rosa's chain-link gate, past the Virgin Mary statue and the marigolds, and knocked on the front door with 3 precise taps. Rosa opened it. The two women had never met, but they recognized each other immediately, not as individuals, as categories. Rosa saw wealth and control and the particular cruelty of a woman who believed that money was a universal solvent that could dissolve any inconvenience. Vivian saw poverty and stubbornness and the kind of maternal ferocity that could not be bought because it had never been for sale. "Mrs. Johnson," Vivian said, "my name is Vivian Cruz. May I come in?" Rosa looked at her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside, not out of deference, out of the understanding that some conversations needed to happen indoors, away from neighbors who would talk. They stood in Rosa's kitchen. Vivian declined the offer of coffee with a small shake of her head. She looked around the room with an expression that catalogued every detail: the worn linoleum, the refrigerator with Daniel's artwork held up by magnets, the medication bottles on the counter, the small table with 3 chairs, one of them with a booster seat that Daniel had long outgrown, but that Rosa had never removed because removing it felt like admitting he was growing up too fast. "I will be direct," Vivian said. "I understand that your daughter has a child. I understand that this child is biologically connected to my son. I am here to discuss a resolution that serves everyone's interests." "A resolution," Rosa repeated. "A financial arrangement. Generous, more than generous. Enough to cover your medical expenses, your daughter's career development, and the child's education through college. In exchange, your daughter would agree to relocate outside of Miami. A clean separation, no contact with Stephen, no public connection to the Cruz family. The child would be provided for materially. He would want for nothing." Rosa listened to this with the patience of a woman who had survived 63 years of being underestimated by people who mistook her quietness for weakness. You are offering to buy my grandson, Rosa said. I am offering to provide for him, Vivian corrected smoothly, while protecting all parties from the complications of a situation that benefits no one in its current form. You came to my house, Rosa said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her voice carried the kind of authority that could not be purchased or inherited. It could only be earned through decades of loving fiercely and losing greatly and standing up anyway. You stood in my kitchen, and you offered to buy my grandson like he is a line item on a balance sheet, like he is a problem to be managed instead of a child to be loved. Vivian's expression remained neutral. Mrs. Johnson, I understand the emotional dimension of this, but surely you can see that. Samantha's voice came from the doorway. Get out of my mother's house. Vivian turned. Samantha stood in the entrance to the kitchen. She had arrived from the estate 10 minutes ago. She had heard everything. 7 years ago I was too young and too scared to fight you, Samantha said. Her voice was steady in a way that transcended calm. It was the steadiness of bedrock, of something that had been compressed by pressure and time until it became unbreakable. I was 21 years old, and you sat me down and told me I was not appropriate for your son, and I believed you. I walked away. I let you win, Samantha. I am not 21 anymore, Vivian, and you do not get to decide who my son knows or does not know. Not anymore. Not ever again. You do not get to stand in my mother's kitchen and offer money for a child like you are negotiating a real estate acquisition. He is not an asset. He is not a liability. He is a 6-year-old boy who likes sharks and hates green vegetables and asks questions that I cannot always answer. And he is mine. Mine and Stephen's. And no amount of money you put on this table will change that. Vivian straightened. Her composure held, but barely. Something flickered behind her eyes. Not guilt. Vivian Cruz was not built for guilt, but something adjacent to it. Something that might have been the recognition that the variables had shifted beyond her ability to recalculate. You are making a mistake, Vivian said. Both of you. This will not end the way you think it will. Maybe not, Samantha said. But it will end the way we choose. Not the way you choose. That is what is different now. Rosa stepped forward. Her hands were trembling. Her body was small and her voice was quiet, and she was the most powerful person in the room. You should leave my house, Mrs. Cruz. You are not welcome here. Vivian looked from Samantha to Rosa and back. She seemed to consider speaking again. Then she did something Samantha had never seen her do. She stopped. She collected herself. She walked to the door. On the threshold, she paused. Stephen will regret this, she said. When the novelty wears off and the reality sets in, he will regret this. Maybe, Samantha said, but that will be his regret to carry, not yours. You do not get to carry things for him anymore. Vivian left. The black car pulled away from the curb. Rosa's house settled back into its ordinary quiet, and Samantha sat down at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands, not crying, just breathing, just letting the adrenaline work its way through her system like a drug wearing off, leaving behind the shaky aftermath of a fight she had spent 7 years preparing to win. Rosa sat down beside her, put one trembling hand on Samantha's back. You did good, mija, Rosa said quietly. You did real good. Stephen found out what his mother had done that same evening. Samantha called him, not because she wanted his reaction, but because he needed to understand exactly who he was choosing between. His response was not what she expected. She expected anger. She got something worse. She got the quiet devastation of a man who finally understood, fully and completely, the extent to which he had been managed, controlled, and lied to by the person who was supposed to love him most. He drove to Vivian's house that night, a penthouse in Brickell with views that made the city look like something you could own. He stood in her living room, surrounded by furniture that had been chosen by decorators and art that had been selected by advisors, and a life that had been assembled by a woman who believed that assembly was the same as love. You cost me 6 years with my son, Stephen said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The words carried their own volume. You cost me the woman I loved. You sat in this apartment and you told me she left because she did not want me. You told me she chose her career. You told me she asked for a clean break. And the entire time, you had driven her away. You paid her to disappear. And when she would not take your money, you lied to me about why she left. You let me believe I was not worth staying for. Vivian stood by the window. For the first time in Samantha's telling of this story, and for the first time perhaps in Stephen's entire experience of his mother, Vivian Cruz looked uncertain. I was protecting you, she said. You were protecting yourself, Stephen corrected. You were protecting your plans, your dynasty, your vision of what the Cruz family was supposed to look like. And you were so committed to that vision that you erased a woman and a child from my life without my knowledge or consent. Everything I did was for this family. No, everything you did was for your version of this family. The version where I marry the right woman and run the right company and live the right life. You're right, not mine. Never mine. He paused. The kind of pause that comes before something irreversible. We are done, he said. Not as mother and son. I cannot undo biology any more than you can undo what you did. But you will never again make a decision about my life, about my son, about Samantha. That era is over. If you want to be part of what comes next, you will earn it, the way everyone else has to earn it, through honesty and respect and the basic human decency of letting people make their own choices. He walked out. The door closed behind him with a sound that was neither loud nor dramatic, just final. The sound of a man leaving one version of himself in a penthouse in Brickell and walking into the elevator as someone else entirely. What happened next was not a love story. It was something harder, something less glamorous and more valuable. It was a trust story. And trust stories do not move in straight lines. They move in circles, in spirals, in the slow and sometimes agonizing pattern of 2 steps forward and 1 step back, repeated so many times that progress becomes invisible until you stop and look at where you started and realize you are standing somewhere you never thought you would reach. Stephen did not try to become Daniel's father overnight. That was the first sign that something had actually changed in him. The old Stephen, the one who ran a telecommunications empire and measured every outcome in quarterly results, would have approached fatherhood the way he approached an acquisition. Identify the target, allocate resources, execute aggressively, close the deal. This Stephen did something different. He asked permission. Can I see him this week? He said to Samantha on the phone 2 days after the confrontation with his mother. Not a demand, a question, delivered with the careful humility of someone who understood that the person on the other end of the line had every reason to say no, and he would have no right to argue if she did. What did you have in mind? Samantha asked. I do not know. Whatever is appropriate, whatever you think he is ready for. I could come to Rosa's house if that is comfortable for him, or somewhere neutral. A park, a restaurant, wherever he would feel safe. Samantha was quiet for a moment. She was doing what she always did. Calculating, weighing variables, running the scenario through the filter of 6 years of single motherhood, which had taught her that the only reliable predictor of future behavior was past behavior, and Stephen's past behavior was not encouraging. But his present behavior was different. She could not deny that. The way he had spoken to Maria, the way he had confronted his mother, the way he was asking instead of telling. These were not the actions of a man performing change for an audience. These were the actions of a man who had looked at the wreckage of his own choices and decided, quietly and without fanfare, to start clearing the debris. Saturday, Samantha said. Come to the park near Rosa's house, 2 o'clock. I will be there the entire time. And Stephen, do not bring gifts. Do not bring toys. Do not try to buy his affection. Just show up and be a person. That is all he needs right now. A person who shows up. I will be there, Stephen said. He was there at 1:30. Samantha watched him from across the street as she and Daniel walked toward the park entrance. He was sitting on a bench near the playground, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, which was so far outside his normal aesthetic that she almost did not recognize him. No watch, no designer labels visible. Just a man on a bench waiting, with the nervous energy of someone who understood that the next hour mattered more than every boardroom presentation he had ever delivered combined. Daniel noticed him before they reached the bench. The boy slowed his pace, his dark eyes locking onto Stephen with the evaluative intensity of a small predator, assessing whether something in its environment was a threat or a curiosity. That is the man from the other night, Daniel said. From Abuela's house. Yes, Samantha confirmed. The one who looked at me like he knew me. Yes, why is he here? Because he wants to meet you. Properly. He wants to talk to you and learn about you and spend some time with you. If that is okay with you. Daniel considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice weighing a constitutional matter. "Is he my dad?" Daniel asked again. The same question from Rosa's living room, but different this time, less shocked, more deliberate, as if he had spent the past several days processing the possibility and was now ready to receive the official confirmation. "Yes," Samantha said. "He is." "Okay," Daniel said, and he walked toward the bench, not eagerly, not reluctantly, with the measured pace of a child who had decided to gather data before forming a conclusion. Samantha followed 3 steps behind, close enough to intervene, far enough to give Daniel the space to navigate this on his own terms. Stephen stood when they approached. He looked terrified, the kind of terror that does not show on the surface but lives in the eyes, in the tightness around the mouth, in the way the hands hang at the sides uncertain of what to do with themselves. "Hi, Daniel," Stephen said. "Hi," Daniel replied. Then, with the directness that was his most consistent character trait, he added, "My mom says you are my dad." "That is right. Where were you?" The question was not accusatory. It was factual, a request for information. Where were you? The way someone might ask, "Where were you when I called?" Except the call had lasted 6 years and the phone had never rung. Stephen glanced at Samantha. She gave him a look that said, "This is yours to answer." "I did not know about you," Stephen said. He crouched down to Daniel's level, bringing his eyes to the height where Daniel could study them without looking up. "That is not an excuse. It is just the truth. Your mom and I were together a long time ago, and then we were not together anymore, and I did not know she was going to have you. When I found out, I wanted to meet you right away. But I also wanted to make sure it was okay with your mom and with you, because showing up in someone's life is something you should only do if they want you there." Daniel absorbed this. His eyes moved over Stephen's face with the same analytical focus he applied to his homework, his building projects, his ongoing investigation into whether sharks were genuinely the most intelligent predators in the ocean or just the most overrated. "My mom said trust is not a gift," Daniel said. "It is a pattern. So, I'm going to watch your pattern." Stephen blinked. Then he did something Samantha had not seen him do since that summer 7 years ago. He smiled with his whole face. Not the professional smile, not the camera smile, the real one that started somewhere behind his ribcage and arrived at his mouth like it had traveled a long distance to get there. "That sounds fair," Stephen said. "What would you like to do today?" Daniel thought about it. "There are tide pools at the nature center near here. I want to show you something about sea anemones." "Lead the way," Stephen said. And Daniel did, walking slightly ahead of Stephen with the unconscious authority of a child who knows where he is going and assumes the adults will follow. Stephen fell into step beside him, matching his pace, shortening his stride to stay parallel rather than ahead. Samantha watched from behind as her son led his father toward tide pools, and she felt something she had not felt in so long she had almost forgotten what it was called. She felt hope. Not the reckless hope of her 20s, the kind that throws itself off cliffs and trusts the universe to provide a net. This was different, older, more cautious. The hope of a woman who had been disappointed enough times to know that hope was a risk and who was choosing to take that risk anyway because the alternative was worse. The alternative was safe and comfortable and permanent and completely empty. At the tide pools, Daniel transformed. This was his territory, his domain. He knew the names of every creature in the shallow water. He could explain the symbiotic relationship between clownfish and sea anemones with the fluency of a marine biology professor, despite being 3.5 feet tall and missing 2 front teeth. "This one is a giant green anemone," Daniel told Stephen, pointing to a waving green mass in the pool. "Its tentacles have cnidocytes. Those are stinging cells. They inject venom into prey. But some animals are immune. Like the clownfish, they have a mucus coating that protects them, so they can live inside the anemone without getting stung." "That is incredible," Stephen said. "How do you know all of this?" "Books," Daniel said simply. "And videos. And the aquarium. I go every month, sometimes twice. Mama takes me even when she is tired because she knows it is important." Stephen looked at Samantha. The gratitude in his expression was so raw, she had to look away from it. "Your mom is an extraordinary person," Stephen said to Daniel. "I know," Daniel replied. "She is the smartest person I know. She can fix anything. When the kitchen faucet broke, she watched a video and fixed it herself. When my bike chain came off, she figured out how to put it back on. She does not need help from anyone." The words were spoken with pride, But Samantha heard something else underneath them. A child's understanding, absorbed through years of observation, that his mother did everything alone because there was no one else to do it with her. That self-sufficiency was not just a character trait, but a survival mechanism. That the woman he admired most in the world was admirable precisely because she had never had the luxury of being anything else. "She does not need help," Daniel repeated, looking at Stephen with an expression that was halfway between a statement and a challenge. "But sometimes the faucet is really hard to reach, and she has to stand on a chair, and I am not tall enough to hold the chair steady." Stephen met his son's eyes. "I would like to hold the chair steady," he said quietly. "If she will let me. You will have to ask her," Daniel said. "She does not like it when people decide things for her. You have to ask." "I will remember that," Stephen promised. They spent 2 hours at the tide pools. Stephen asked questions that were genuine rather than performative. He did not pretend to know things he did not know, which Daniel respected immediately, because children have a radar for adults who fake expertise. He admitted when he was confused. He asked Daniel to explain things twice when he did not understand them the first time. He treated a 6-year-old's knowledge as valid, as worth engaging with seriously, and Daniel responded to this the way all humans respond when they feel genuinely seen. He opened up. By the end of the 2 hours, Daniel was talking more freely than Samantha had ever heard him talk to someone who was not family. He was showing Stephen his favorite rock formations, explaining the difference between hermit crabs and shore crabs, demonstrating the correct technique for approaching a tide pool without disturbing the organisms, which involved slow movements and a low center of gravity and absolutely no splashing. Stephen listened to all of it, absorbed all of it, and when Daniel was not looking, he looked at Samantha with an expression that said, "I cannot believe I missed 6 years of this. I cannot believe I almost missed all of it." On the walk back to the park, Daniel reached up and took Stephen's hand. He did it without ceremony, without announcement. One moment his hand was at his side, and the next it was wrapped around Stephen's fingers with the casual trust of a child who had made a decision and saw no reason to explain it. Stephen's stride faltered, just for a second, just long enough for Samantha, walking behind them, to see his shoulders rise and fall with a breath that carried more weight than oxygen. They reached the park entrance. Daniel let go of Stephen's hand and turned to face him with the formal seriousness of someone concluding a business meeting. "That was acceptable," Daniel said. "Acceptable," Stephen repeated. "For a first time. Tide pools are a good activity. Next time we could go to the aquarium. They have a shark exhibit. I have been 4 times, but I would go a 5th time because there are things I might have missed." "I would love to go to the aquarium with you," Stephen said. "Okay." Daniel looked at Samantha. "Can he come to the aquarium?" "We will talk about it," Samantha said, which in parent language meant yes, but I need to maintain the illusion that I am considering it carefully. Daniel nodded. Then he walked to the car without looking back, apparently considering the matter settled. Stephen watched him go. Then he turned to Samantha. "Thank you," he said, and his voice sounded like someone who had been holding his breath for 2 hours and was only now remembering how to exhale. "He did well with you," Samantha said. She kept her voice neutral, but there was an acknowledgement underneath it. A concession. He was comfortable. That matters more than anything. "Can I come back next week?" "Same conditions." "I will be there. No gifts. No trying to impress him. Just show up and be present." "Same conditions," Stephen agreed. "Every week. For as long as you will let me." Samantha nodded. Then she walked to her car and drove home with Daniel in the back seat, already narrating the afternoon's discoveries into a small notebook he kept for scientific observations. "The man knows a lot about engineering but almost nothing about marine biology," Daniel recorded, speaking his notes aloud the way he always did. He did not pretend to know things he did not know, which is good because pretending is annoying. His hands are very big. He was careful not to disturb the organisms. He gets a 7 out of 10 for tide pool behavior. The 3 missing points are because he asked if a sea cucumber was a plant, which is honestly not acceptable, but I am willing to overlook it because he seemed genuinely interested in the correct answer. Samantha drove and said nothing and let her son's voice fill the car with the ordinary beautiful sound of a child who had just met his father and was processing it the only way he knew how. With data, with analysis, and with the careful, cautious optimism of someone who wanted to believe but needed evidence first. "He gets it from me," Samantha thought, "and some things from other places." The weeks became months. Stephen came to Miami every Saturday without exception. Not every other Saturday, Not when it was convenient. Every single Saturday, regardless of weather, workload, travel complications, or the very loud opinions of his board of directors about why the CEO of Cruz Communications was spending every weekend in Little Havana instead of attending industry conferences. He went to the aquarium with Daniel 4 times. Daniel's assessment improved with each visit, moving from 7 out of 10 to 8 out of 10 after Stephen correctly identified a nurse shark without prompting, and then to 8.05 after Stephen admitted that he had been studying marine biology books during the week because he wanted to keep up with the conversations. "You are studying," Daniel said, and for the first time, Samantha saw her son look at Stephen with something that was not evaluation. It was respect. "I want to understand what you care about," Stephen said. "I missed a lot of years. I'm trying to catch up." "You cannot catch up," Daniel said honestly. 6 years is a lot of information, but you can start from here and go forward. That is what Mama says about things you cannot change. You start from where you are, not from where you wish you were. "Your Mama is right about most things," Stephen said. "She is right about all things," Daniel corrected. "But sometimes she does not believe it herself." Stephen looked at Samantha when Daniel said this. She was pretending to read a placard about hammerhead shark migration patterns and pretending she could not hear them. She could hear everything. She always could, but she kept her eyes on the placard and let her son's words settle over her like something warm and uncomfortable. She does not believe it herself. Was that true? Had she spent so long being strong for everyone else that she had forgotten to believe in her own strength for herself? Had she built walls so effective that they kept out not just pain but everything else? Joy, connection, the possibility that someone might want to stand beside her, not because she needed them, but because they wanted to be there. She stared at the placard about hammerhead sharks and thought about walls and doors and the difference between protection and imprisonment, and she did not arrive at an answer. Not yet, but she arrived at the edge of one, the place where the question stops being theoretical and starts being personal. Stephen sold the Star Island estate 2 months after the confrontation with his mother. It had been listed for 4 weeks and sold to a tech executive from California who planned to renovate everything, which seemed appropriate. Let someone else's vision replace the one that had housed so many carefully maintained lies. He bought a house in Coral Gables, not near Star Island, not in Brickell, in a neighborhood 12 minutes from Rosa's house, where the yards were generous and the trees were old and the families had children who rode bicycles on the sidewalk and left chalk drawings that washed away in the afternoon rain. The house was not modest by normal standards. It had 4 bedrooms and a pool and a kitchen that opened to a backyard where you could hear birds instead of boat engines. But by Cruz standards, it was practically a cottage. Vivienne would have found it embarrassing. Stephen found it perfect. He invited Samantha and Daniel over before the furniture arrived. The empty rooms echoed with their footsteps as Stephen walked them through the space, explaining his vision for each room with an enthusiasm that reminded Samantha, painfully, of the man she had loved at 21. The man who got excited about ideas and possibilities in the future. The man who had been buried under corporate obligations and maternal control for so long she had assumed he was gone. He was not gone. He had just been waiting for a reason to come back. "This would be your room," Stephen said to Daniel, opening the door to a bedroom on the 2nd floor. It had large windows facing east, which meant morning light. A built-in bookshelf covered one entire wall. The closet was the size of Daniel's current bedroom at Rosa's house, but Stephen did not mention that comparison, and Samantha was grateful for the restraint. Daniel walked into the room slowly. He touched the bookshelf. He looked out the window at the backyard below, where a mango tree spread its branches like an invitation. "There is space for a desk," Daniel observed. "I would need a desk for my research. And the bookshelf is good, but I would need an additional one because I have 43 books at home, and I am acquiring new ones at a rate of approximately 2 per month. We can add as many bookshelves as you need," Stephen said. "And the window faces east. That means morning light. Morning light is better for reading than afternoon light because it is less harsh." "You know a lot about light," Stephen said. "I know a lot about everything," Daniel replied without arrogance. It was a simple statement of fact from a child who had spent his entire life compensating for the things he did not have by becoming an expert in everything he could access. Books were free at the library. Knowledge did not require a father. Intelligence was the one resource that belonged to him completely, and he had invested in it with the single-minded dedication of someone who understood, instinctively, that his mind was the safest place he would ever live. Samantha stood in the doorway watching her son plan the layout of a bedroom in his father's house, and she felt the crack in her chest widen another fraction of an inch. Not pain, not anymore, something else. Something that had been frozen for 7 years and was slowly, reluctantly, allowing itself to thaw. The visits became more frequent. Saturday turned into Saturday and Wednesday. Wednesday turned into Saturday and Wednesday and sometimes Tuesday if Daniel had a school event or a science fair or a particularly interesting book he wanted to discuss with someone who would engage with it at the level he required. Stephen did not just show up for the milestones. He showed up for the ordinary days. The homework sessions that ended in frustration when math refused to cooperate. The evenings when Daniel was tired and irritable and wanted nothing except to be left alone with a book about cephalopods. The mornings when he woke up anxious about a test and needed someone to sit with him while he reviewed his notes, not helping, not quizzing, just sitting, being present, proving through physical proximity that he was not going anywhere. He learned that Daniel would not eat green vegetables under any circumstances, and that this was a battle not worth fighting. He learned that Daniel needed exactly 11 minutes of quiet time after school before he was ready to interact with anyone. He learned that Daniel's favorite meal was Rosa's arroz con pollo, and that no restaurant version would ever compare, so he asked Rosa to teach him the recipe. Rosa did, watching this billionaire stand in her tiny kitchen struggling with a sofrito like a man defusing a bomb, and she said nothing about the irony of it because the irony spoke for itself. He learned that Daniel had nightmares sometimes. Not often, but sometimes, usually after a day that had involved too much stimulation or too many new experiences, he would wake at 2 a.m. with his heart racing and his mind full of images he could not articulate. And on those nights, when Stephen happened to be nearby because he had stayed for dinner and fallen asleep on the couch, he would hear Rosa's phone ring and hear Samantha's voice saying he is asking for someone, and I think he means you. And Stephen would drive 12 minutes in the dark and sit on the edge of Daniel's bed and talk to him about the ocean, about the deep water where sunlight never reaches, about the creatures that live there, adapted to pressure and darkness, thriving in conditions that would destroy anything built for the surface. Some of the strongest things in the world live in the deepest water, Stephen would tell him. They do not need sunlight. They make their own light. Bioluminescence. They carry it inside them. Like Mom, Daniel said once, half asleep. She makes her own light too. Stephen was quiet for a long time after that. Yes, he finally said. Exactly like your mom. Rosa watched all of this with the patient attention of a woman who had seen enough of life to know that redemption was real but rare, and that it looked nothing like the movies. It did not arrive with music and fanfare. It arrived in a man learning to make sofrito, in a billionaire sitting on a child's bed at 2 a.m. talking about deep-sea fish, in the slow, undramatic accumulation of 1,000 small choices, each one saying, I am here. I am staying. I am different than I was. He is not the same boy his mother raised, Rosa told Samantha one evening. They were sitting on Rosa's porch. The sun was setting over Little Havana in shades of orange and purple. Daniel was inside doing homework. Stephen had left an hour ago after helping Daniel build a diorama of a coral reef ecosystem that was due the next day. He is becoming someone else, Rosa continued. Someone better. And I know you see it, even if you do not want to admit it. I see it, Samantha said. And I am terrified. Of what? That he will hurt you again. No, that he will not. Because if he does not hurt me, if he actually becomes the person he is showing me he can be, then I have to face the possibility that I could let him in. And I do not know how to do that anymore, Mama. I knew how when I was 21. I was good at it then. Letting people in, trusting them, believing that love was enough. But I am not 21 anymore. I am 30. I have a son. I have scars. I have 6 years of proof that the only person I can rely on is myself. And you are asking me to unlearn all of that. I am not asking you to unlearn it, Rosa said. I am asking you to add to it. You learn to survive alone. That was necessary. That was brave. But survival is not the same as living, Mija. And you have been surviving for so long that you have forgotten the difference. Samantha said nothing. She watched the sunset and she held her mother's hand, trembling as it was, and she felt the truth of Rosa's words settle into her bones like heat from the fading sun. Survival is not the same as living. Was that what she had been doing? Surviving, getting through days, managing logistics, solving problems, being strong enough and smart enough and disciplined enough to ensure that Daniel had everything he needed while the woman providing it had quietly stopped needing anything for herself. When was the last time she had wanted something? Not needed, wanted. When was the last time she had allowed herself the luxury of desire, of longing, of imagining a future that included more than just adequacy and stability and the absence of catastrophe? She could not remember. And that was the most frightening answer of all. 4 months after Stephen moved to Coral Gables, Daniel started spending weekends at his house. Friday evening to Sunday afternoon. Samantha dropped him off the first time with a detailed list of instructions that Stephen accepted without complaint. "Bedtime is 8:30, Samantha said. "He will try to negotiate for 9. Do not cave. He needs sleep even when he insists he does not." 8:30, Stephen confirmed. "No screens after 7. He gets overstimulated and then cannot sleep. Books are fine. Drawing is fine. Building projects are fine. But no tablet and no television after 7. No screens after 7. He takes a multivitamin with breakfast. The purple ones, not the orange ones. The orange ones make him gag. Do not ask me why. It is a texture thing. Purple vitamins, not orange. If he has a nightmare, do not turn on the overhead light. Use the small lamp on his nightstand. Bright light makes it worse. Sit with him. Talk about something calm. The ocean works. Architecture works. Anything that engages his brain without activating his anxiety. Small lamp. Calm topics. Ocean. Architecture. Samantha realized she had been standing in Stephen's doorway for 15 minutes delivering instructions like a military briefing. She also realized that Daniel had already disappeared into the house and was likely in his bedroom arranging his books on the shelves. "I am being excessive," she said. "You are being a mother," Stephen replied, "and I am grateful for every detail. I would rather have too much information than not enough. I have 6 years of catching up to do, and I would rather do it right than do it fast." She looked at him, standing in the doorway of a house he had bought to be near his son, wearing a shirt that had a small stain on the collar from the sofrito Rosa had taught him to make the previous week. His eyes steady, his posture patient, his entire being radiating the quiet determination of a man who understood that the thing he was building was more important than anything he had ever built before. "Call me if anything comes up," she said. "Anything at all. I do not care what time it is. I will." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Stephen, he is the most important thing in my life. The most important thing in any version of my life. If you let him down, if you break his trust, there will not be a second chance. Not from him, not from me. He is not like me. I can survive disappointment. He should not have to." "I understand," Stephen said, "and I will not let him down. I know those are words, and I know you need more than words. So I will just keep showing up until the words become unnecessary, until the pattern speaks for itself." She nodded, and she drove home, and the house was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of absence, of a room that was missing the person who made it feel like a room instead of just a space. She sat on Daniel's bed, pulled his pillow against her chest, breathed in the smell of him, the particular scent of childhood that was already beginning to change as he grew. And she missed him. Not the way you miss someone who is gone, the way you miss someone who is exactly where they should be, in a place that is good for them, with a person who loves them, and you are simultaneously grateful and gutted. Because the thing you built alone is now being shared, and sharing is right, and sharing is necessary, and sharing is also the most painful form of growth you have ever experienced. She did not sleep well that night. At 2 a.m, she texted Stephen, "Is he okay?" The response came in 11 seconds. "Sound asleep. No nightmares. He made me read 3 chapters of a book about giant squid before bed. I now know more about cephalopod intelligence than I ever anticipated." Samantha stared at the message. Then she typed back, "Welcome to parenthood." Then she added, "Thank you for being there." She stared at those last 5 words for a long time before hitting send. They were the most vulnerable thing she had said to Stephen Cruz in 7 years. 5 words that acknowledged for the first time that his presence in Daniel's life was not just tolerable or acceptable or manageable. It was something she was thankful for. The response came in 4 seconds. "There is nowhere else I would rather be." She put her phone down and stared at the ceiling and felt the walls inside her shift. Not collapse, not crumble, just shift. like a building settling into new ground, finding a different foundation, adjusting to accommodate something that had not been part of the original blueprint, but was now undeniably part of the structure. 6 months after that first Saturday at the tide pools, the pattern had established itself so firmly that it no longer felt like a pattern. It felt like life. Stephen was at Rosa's house 3 evenings a week. Daniel split his time between the two homes with the adaptability of a child who had been given the one thing he wanted most and was determined not to waste it. Samantha and Stephen spoke daily, sometimes about Daniel, sometimes about logistics, sometimes about nothing in particular. The conversations had lost their careful formality. They had become something Samantha did not have a word for. Not friendship exactly, not romance, something in the space between, something warm and undefined and growing in a direction she was not yet ready to name. It was Daniel who named it first. They were at the aquarium. Visit number 9. Daniel had finally achieved a 10 out of 10 rating for Stephen's marine biology knowledge, which he had announced with a ceremony of someone bestowing a knighthood. They were standing in front of the shark tank, the massive wall of blue light that made everything in the room feel underwater. "You love Mom," Daniel said, not a question. A statement delivered while watching a hammerhead shark glide past the glass with the indifferent elegance of something that had been perfected by 400 million years of evolution. Stephen looked at Daniel, then at Samantha, who was standing 5 feet away pretending to read a placard about shark conservation and hearing every word. "Yes," Stephen said. "I do. She loves you too," Daniel continued. "She does not say it, but she looks at you the way she looks at the ocean, like it scares her and she cannot stop looking at it anyway." Samantha closed her eyes. Her son, her brilliant, impossible, sees-everything son, had just described her emotional state with more accuracy than any therapist could have managed in 100 sessions. "You should tell her," Daniel said. "I think she needs to be ready to hear it," Stephen replied. "She has been ready for a long time," Daniel said. "She is just scared. She thinks if she says it, something bad will happen. Because last time she loved someone, something bad happened. So she thinks love and bad things go together, but they do not. Not always." "When did you get so smart?" Stephen asked, echoing the question Samantha had asked herself 1,000 times. "I was born smart," Daniel said, "but I got wise from watching Mom. She does not know I watch her, but I do, every day, and I see her getting less scared. Every time you show up, she gets a little less scared. So just keep showing up. That is all she needs. Someone who keeps showing up." The boy turned back to the shark tank. Conversation apparently concluded. Matter settled. The simplicity of a child who saw the obvious thing that the adults were too complicated to see themselves. Samantha stood in front of her placard about shark conservation, and her vision blurred. Not dramatically, not with the cinematic tears that stories usually describe, just a slight softening of the edges, the way the world looks when something you've been holding for a very long time finally begins to loosen its grip. She did not say anything. Not then. Not at the aquarium. Not on the drive home. Not during dinner at Rosa's house, where Stephen helped Daniel with his science journal, while Rosa made black beans and Samantha stood at the kitchen counter doing absolutely nothing productive while watching 3 people she loved exist in the same room. She waited until Daniel was asleep, until Rosa had gone to bed, until the house was quiet and the dishes were done and there was nothing left to manage or organize or control. Until there was nothing left except her and Stephen standing in Rosa's kitchen, the same kitchen where Vivian had tried to buy a child and Rosa had thrown her out, and Samantha had put her head in her hands and breathed. They stood on opposite sides of the counter, 2 feet of laminate between them. The overhead light was off. The only illumination came from the stove light, which cast everything in a warm amber that made the kitchen feel smaller, closer, more intimate than it had any right to be. "I heard what Daniel said," Samantha began, "at the aquarium." "I figured you did," Stephen replied. He said it with a slight smile that held no smugness, only patience. "He's 6 years old, and he sees more clearly than I do. He is extraordinary." "He is," Samantha agreed. "And he is right, about most of it." Stephen went very still, the stillness she recognized, the stillness Daniel had inherited, the stillness of someone who knows that the next words spoken in this room will determine the shape of every moment that follows. "I am not going to say it first," Samantha said. "I said it first last time, 7 years ago, in your apartment, after a dinner you cooked badly and a movie we did not finish watching. I looked at you and I said I love you, and you said it back, And 2 months later, your mother erased me from your life and you let her. So I am not saying it first. Not this time. Not ever again. If this is real, if this thing between us is what I think it is, then you are going to have to be the one who steps forward. Because I have been stepping forward alone for 7 years, and I am tired, Stephen. I am so tired of being brave by myself. Her voice cracked on the last word. The crack was small, almost inaudible, but Stephen heard it the way he heard everything about her now, with full attention, with the understanding that this woman's vulnerability was not weakness, but the rarest form of courage, the willingness to be seen, the willingness to need, the willingness to risk everything she had built on the possibility that this time, the person she loved would not let her fall. He moved around the counter, not fast, not desperately, with the deliberate, unhurried pace of someone who understood that this moment required precision and care. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his chest. Not touching, not yet. Asking permission with his proximity. "I love you," he said. The words were simple, unadorned, carrying no poetry, no flourish, no attempt to make them more than what they were. "I loved you 7 years ago and I was too weak to protect it. I let my mother make my choices. I let fear make my choices. I chose easy over right and comfortable over real, and it cost me you, and it cost me 6 years with my son, and it cost me the person I was supposed to become." He paused. The stove light caught the silver at his temples, the lines around his eyes, the face of a man who had aged not from time but from understanding, which is a different kind of aging entirely, the kind that makes you more rather than less. "I am not that man anymore," Stephen continued, "not because I decided to be different, but because I did the work of being different. Every Saturday, every phone call, every nightmare I sat through, every sofrito I burned in your mother's kitchen, every time Daniel tested me and I stayed, every time you pushed me away and I did not leave. That is not performance. That is who I am now, built from the wreckage of who I was, and I love you, not the memory of you, not the idea of you. You, this version, the one who irons her blouse at 4:45 in the morning, the one who fixed the faucet standing on a chair, the one who raised my son to be the most remarkable human being I have ever met. That woman, I love that woman, and I will spend every day proving it if you will let me." Samantha looked at his face, at this man she had loved and lost and refused to love again, because loving him had cost her everything. And she saw what Daniel had seen, what Rosa had seen, what she had been refusing to see because seeing it meant dismantling the only defense she had left. He was different, not perfect, not finished, but different, changed in the way that matters, changed in the way that shows, not in grand gestures or expensive gifts or promises made in moments of emotion, changed in the daily mundane, unglamorous pattern of showing up, again and again and again, until the pattern became proof, until the proof became trust, until the trust became something strong enough to stand on. She reached for his hands, took them in hers, held them the way she held everything, carefully, precisely, with the full awareness of what she was choosing and what it could cost her. "Then stay," she whispered. "Stay and be real, and do not make me regret this." "Never," he said, and she believed him, not because of the word, but because of every single day he had already made it true. The next morning, Daniel came downstairs for breakfast and found Stephen at the kitchen table. This was not unusual. Stephen had been at the kitchen table many mornings, but something about this morning was different, and Daniel, who noticed everything, noticed the difference immediately. He looked at his mother. He looked at Stephen. He looked at the way they were sitting, closer than usual. The space between them altered in a way that was invisible to the eye, but obvious to a child who had spent his entire life reading the distance between adults. "So," Daniel said, sitting down and reaching for the cereal box, "did you finally tell her?" Stephen glanced at Samantha. She glanced back. The smallest smile passed between them. "I told her," Stephen confirmed. "Good," Daniel said. He poured cereal with the focused precision of someone conducting a scientific procedure. "It was getting really obvious, and I was running out of patience." "You have the patience of a saint," Stephen said. "No," Daniel corrected. "I have the patience of a scientist. Saints believe in things they cannot see. Scientists wait for evidence, and the evidence has been pretty clear for a while now." He ate his cereal. Samantha made coffee. Stephen sat at the table in a kitchen that smelled like café con leche and cereal, and the particular warmth of a morning where nothing dramatic is happening and everything important already has. Rosa shuffled in a few minutes later. She looked at the three of them, at the way they were arranged around her kitchen table, a configuration that had never existed before and now looked like it had always been there. She said nothing. She poured herself coffee. She sat down. But she smiled, the kind of smile that does not need an audience or an explanation, the kind of smile that comes from watching something broken become whole and knowing that the wholeness was earned, not given, that every piece was fought for, that the people sitting at this table had survived the hardest versions of themselves and chosen, deliberately and with full knowledge of the risks, to build something new. It was not a fairy tale ending. Fairy tales end with a kiss and a promise and the assumption that nothing difficult will ever happen again. This was not that. This was a Tuesday morning in Little Havana, cereal and coffee, and a 6-year-old boy lecturing his father about the migratory patterns of whale sharks while his grandmother's hands trembled around a cup, and his mother sat in a kitchen chair and let herself, for the first time in 7 years, stop being the only strong person in the room. There would be difficult days ahead. There would be arguments about parenting and boundaries and how to navigate a relationship that had been broken and rebuilt and carried the scars of both processes. There would be conversations with Vivian that were painful and necessary. There would be moments when Samantha's walls tried to go back up, when the old fear whispered that this was temporary, that people who hurt you once will hurt you again, that the safest choice was always the lonely one. But there would also be this morning light through Rosa's kitchen window, a child who gave his father a 10 out of 10. A woman who learned that letting someone in was not the same as letting her guard down. A man who proved, through the relentless accumulation of ordinary moments, that the person he became was worth more than the person he had been. And there would be this truth, which Daniel had understood before any of the adults, because children see what we spend years learning to see. That love is not a feeling that arrives and saves you. It is a choice you make every morning when you wake up and decide again to show up, to stay, to hold the chair steady while someone else reaches for something they could not reach alone. That is how this story ends, not with a grand gesture or a dramatic revelation, with a kitchen table, with cereal, with a boy who watches everything, and a woman who carried everything, and a man who finally learned that the only empire worth building is the one that needs you at breakfast. And if this story moved you, if you felt something shift in your chest during these moments, if you recognize any part of this journey in your own life, then I need you to do something for me. Not for the algorithm, not for the numbers, for the truth that lives at the center of this story, which is the same truth that lives at the center of yours. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that survival is not the end of the story, that the walls we build to protect ourselves can also become the walls that imprison us, that the bravest thing a person can do is not to stand alone. The bravest thing a person can do is to let someone stand beside them. Subscribe to Mr. Dawson Stories. Turn on that notification bell, because this is what we do here. We tell stories about real people navigating impossible situations, about love that is earned, not given, about trust that is built, not assumed, about the messy, complicated, painful, beautiful work of becoming better than the worst thing we have ever done. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying through every chapter of this story. Thank you for believing that broken things can be made whole, not by magic, but by the daily, unglamorous, extraordinary act of showing up. I will see you in the next one.